Hello again from me. I'm Michael Tegos, content editor for Smartkarma, and it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Hemesh Singh. He's the co-founder and CTO of Unacademy. Unacademy is an India-based education platform that aims to build the world's largest online knowledge repository for multilingual education. Unacademy uses technology to empower great educators and create a community of self-learners. Hemesh is an engineer by training, having studied electronics and communications engineering in Motilal Nehru National Institute of Technology. Hemesh, thank you very much for being with us.
I'm going to get right into it. And, I just said a couple of words about Unacademy, but I wonder if you could give it to us as well in your own words, the vision behind Unacademy.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me, Michael. Thanks for having me. Thanks to Smartkarma to organizing. To give you an idea about Unacademy, basically we are mainly into live education. So, for example, when you mentioned right, like we want to build the biggest online education repository, I think we still sort of have been focusing on that mission, but our approach has changed over the past 4 years since we've started the business. For the initial first 2 years, our focus was mainly on recorded content. We were creating tools which made it easy for educators to create content. But since then, our focus has mainly shifted towards live classes, and currently, the prime like we conduct a lot of free as well as paid live classes on Unacademy, and these live classes happen like throughout the day, and across almost 40 plus sort of categories. In India, test preparation is a huge market. There's a lot of tests that a lot of learners take to get into a college, to get a job, and for multiple other purposes. But and then we are basically now aiming to provide a single platform where they can just purchase one subscription and then get access to the best of the educators sitting at the comfort of their homes, watch this content from multiple devices, uh, trying to also make classes as interactive as possible, because we believe, and this is something we have seen with the data, that live classes work a lot better in terms of retention and engagement for our learners compared to just pressing a play button on a video. So that is something like we have gained those insights over the 4 years, and now we're leveraging all of that to build a great learner experience as well as our educators, a great experience for our educators. Our educators are also sort of spread out throughout the country. They also teach from the comfort of their homes and so on. That's a little bit about us. To give you some numbers on it, we conduct almost 4,000 live classes every day at this point. This usually range from 1 hour to 3 hours, one to up to 3 hours, and we recently crossed 150,000 paid subscribers. I think we'll cross it today.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So that would be a little bit of an introduction about the company. Let me know if you have any questions.
So how does it work from the educator side? Can you tell us a bit about that?
So again, on the educator side, like I said, everything is remote. We have been, we don't get these educators in our office. We have thousands of educators. These thousands of educators are taking classes from their homes, and we build technology. We basically provide them the tools which help them to go live, which help them to teach better from their laptops and so on. So we help them create a setup at their homes with green screen and just all those kind of things, just to give the best experience that we can to these educators as well as learners. And the way acquisition of these educators happens is in mainly two ways. There are obviously some educators that we reach out to that we believe might be great addition to our platform, but we also receive a lot of inbound interest from these educators, and some of them convert and have become some of our top educators who have grown on our platform, who have sort of gained that following on our platform, and then are now one of the best educators in the country. So it's a mix of both inbound and outbound process. But on a day-to-day basis, once they sign up with Unacademy, it's pretty much 100% online. We do invite some of these educators to, every once in a while to our office to sort of, celebrate, to do some sort of awards and recognitions where we do some educator of the year, educator of the month kind of awards. And I think that sort of also gives them that feeling of, belonging to a sort of a community and an ecosystem. But other than that, it's mostly remote for them.
So I wanted to ask, how COVID-19 has affected the operation and kind of normal procedures of your programs and your functions, because it sounds like in a way you have been ready for this kind of remote learning experience from the get-go. So how has this affected what you do, both on the education level, but also on the company operation level?
Absolutely. So like you mentioned, like we were ready for this before it all started. Idea was from the day one, our idea has been, creating a platform, making sure that we reach out to them rather than, getting everybody into a single space. Because that's obviously a lot more scalable, a platform approach, a tech and product sort of focused approach, where, we build tools, we build the platform, we build the technology, and let these educators use the technology from their homes. So we were ready, so our classes were not affected at all. Rather, we did our pretty much our highest number of classes in March and then in April back to back. We are the numbers that we are seeing, the productivity that we are seeing has been really great. The only thing that was a little bit affected for us was the company operations, because like some of the teams who were coming to office regularly, they were not that used to working remotely. But I think we were like, we since they were sort of familiar with all these tools that we were anyway using to work with educators, like Zoom. Like we would conduct a lot of sessions on Zoom with our educators. We were using remote tools like tools which are which enable remote work, like Slack, Notion, and all of that. So we were already using a lot of those tools. So it was not like I think it was like a week or 2 weeks kind of a transition where we almost touched the same level of productivity that we were earlier at. So from even a company operations point of view, it was not a huge sort of a change for us, because we were already sort of used to using these tools, and just they were part of our workflow anyway. We just had to increase the usage and reliance on these kind of tools a lot more. But I think the team was able to quickly adapt and just move fast and just learn and yeah, basically. So for us, I think the biggest impact would be in terms of business, which where we were seeing a lot of growth. A lot of these coaching centers were shut down. A lot of these schools were shut down. So I think more and more learners and educators were preferring Unacademy as the primary way of teaching and learning. So but other than that, I don't believe we were hugely affected by the entire situation.
Right, and it's interesting that you say that it didn't take you very long to reach previous levels of productivity. Recently, you also announced that 60% of staff will be working from home permanently, which kind of we've seen companies like Twitter also take that step. So, how do you think this this affects operation going forward? What do you think is the vision there?
Yeah, so I think this change that happened, where some of the teams started working remotely. In some of the teams, we saw the productivity go even higher than what we were doing when we were in office. So with that sort of insight, we realized that a huge part of our teams can also be remote. So with that, basically, we decided to do that. And I think moving forward, more and more companies are going to do it. I think remote work earlier was more of a good to have, but I think with the current situation, and I think with almost like no clarity on how is it going to sort of play out in India and across the world. I think remote work is not going to be a good to have anymore. Like it's going to be the default way of working for a lot of companies. I think if there is a possibility that you can make remote work happen, remote work for you, I think companies should already start investing in that, and just because it's not going to be a choice, I think, anymore. Like everybody, even when the let's say the lockdowns are over, people would not be that comfortable, just coming to offices, commuting in crowded public transport, and so on and so forth. So remote work is going to be the default way of working, I think, in the future, at least for the digital companies which can sort of leverage that. But yeah, I mean, nobody really knows how it's going to play out, so I think we are all sort of speculating at this moment.
Sure. And at the same time, this 100% online direction, it proves tricky, right? In terms of security, in terms of this kind of unforeseen circumstances. Unacademy also suffered a data breach recently. Would you like to talk a bit about that and kind of maybe shed some light on what happened and how you sort of address it and make sure that it doesn't happen in the future?
Yeah, definitely. So the breach happened mainly because so one of our key access token, which had with pretty strong sort of permissions, was leaked, and that access token was used to create do some sort of create that access token was used to do some malicious activity into our system, into our infrastructure, some of the things that ideally we would not allow. How we are, we are still there is. So right after the incident happened, right after we got to know about the news, we hired an agency, a third-party agency, to do a complete forensic investigation for us. They have given us an early report where we have sort of identified what were some of the issues that might have been that might have been exploited in order to make this happen, and we have sort of fixed all of those since then. So as of now we are secure, but this is an ongoing fight. I think it's not like you can one day be like, okay, now I'm secure. It's never ending, and we are sort of working with them. We have since then decided to invest a lot more in terms of security, working with some of the best firms, best companies in the industry to gain that, to use their expertise to really understand the space and do the best, do everything that we can to make sure that no such event happens in the future. So I think such events happen. It's not like it's definitely like it's one of the things that every technical team should focus on. Its security is something which is really important, and we always had that in mind. Everything that we had designed earlier, we kept security in mind. But I think the amount of investment you can make can definitely be increased, and I think the expertise that some of the best people in the industry can bring can definitely be a huge value add. That you at this point, I would suggest people should start looking in sooner than later.
Absolutely, yeah. It seems like it's never too early to invest in cybersecurity, and even Zoom itself and a lot bigger companies are finding that out. I think perhaps in education it's a little more imperative, just because of the nature of the industry, dealing with learners and educators.
True, absolutely.
Cool. So one other thing I wanted to ask is, Gaurav, the CEO of Unacademy, recently said that the biggest consumer internet company in India will not be an e-commerce company; it's going to be an education company, which is an interesting sentiment. Both are very strong sectors in India, so I kind of wanted to get your take on that as well. The sort of growth of the education sector and the opportunities therein.
Yeah. So, like, if you look at the Edtech space overall globally, China is clearly the one leading it right now. China has multiple unicorns. China has some of the biggest companies in Edtech space, and I think India sort of shares, some of the cultural values in terms of education. with China, more with China than US or any other country in the West. I think the way education happens in India is very, very similar to in China. A lot of huge population, a lot of people, realizing that education is probably the best way to, uplift their living standard, uplift their socio-economic status, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So the investment that people are ready to make and the investment that the space is seeing, I think clearly sort of is an indicator of how big the space is. I think there's like just some empirical data there, like the amount of income people spend in their entire lives on education and on some of these things is absolutely huge. So and that is also visible in India. Like you will see that some of the tech companies that have come, especially companies like Byju's and so on, they've grown really, really fast and are gaining a lot of investment, gaining a lot of interest from the investors, from the users as well. So I think the space is definitely really interesting. It's hard to say which one is really exactly bigger, because
Mm-hmm.
like we are all still figuring out the behaviors are changing, and the events like COVID can completely change an industry, make or break an industry. So I think some of these things are definitely something to look out for. But I don't think that I can clearly say that okay, education is going to be much bigger than e-commerce. I think both industries are have their pros and cons. They have their limitations and they have their opportunities. But for what it's worth, I think education is going to be a really big industry. I think India, can if not bigger than China, can at least be the number two. I think we are, if not already, I think we will be we'll be very close to number two very soon.
Mm-hmm.
So I think India is going to see a lot more sort of interest in terms of investment, in terms of usage for online learning, online education. I'm sure a lot of different models will emerge, and yeah, I'm very excited about this space and would love to see how it sort of pans out.
And it seems you guys are very well positioned in the market at the moment. So at this point, I'd like to take some questions from the audience as well. So one question is, and that's always an interesting one for startups, but so are you guys looking to fundraise again soon? How do you see the fundraising environment right now?
We are not specifically looking right now, but I think the fundraising environment is definitely from what we are hearing from our friends. I think the fundraising environment is definitely a lot more. Um, I would say not founder friendly at this point. Investors are very sort of conservative at this point.
Mm-hmm.
We are not like there's a lot of lack of clarity in terms of how the situation is going to play out, and um, investors don't really like that kind of lack of clarity. So I think and we believe that um, from what I'm hearing, basically it's the situation is going to be like this for a while until we sort of again seeing growth trends in terms of the overall economy and other spaces in startup. So I think as of now, it's definitely hard to raise money. It's definitely harder than how it was, let's say, 3-4 months back.
Mm-hmm.
So, it, but I think that happens with like almost every when there is a sort of such a black swan kind of an event. I think there might be much bigger impacts than just raising funds. A lot of companies are just shutting down. I know personally friends who are actually being laid off or who have to fire who have to lay off their employees because their companies are not doing well. Revenues are almost zero. So I think it's a very difficult situation for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm. Right. Let's see if I can find another question. So can you talk a bit about your pricing structure, like how you sort of charge fees to students, and what's the profit margin there?
So the way we charge our users is basically it's a subscription-based model. When we started our live classes platform, the earlier model was where you could purchase, individual courses from these educators, where you can decide which educators course you want, and you can pay for that course in particular, something similar to Udemy. But then we decided that it was becoming more and more difficult for the a learner to decide, okay, which educator should they go for, and then if there are multiple educators on the same topic, the decision is just going to get harder for learners. So eventually we decided that we should just bundle everything into a single subscription, which makes the decision much easier for the learner. And if they don't like one educator after purchasing the course, they can just go for the other educators that are there on the platform. So I think that choice and then that overall value offering turned out to be really good, really great for the learners, and it has been very working really well for us. We actually launched that early 2019. I think Jan 31st was the day when we launched it, and since then we have seen a lot of growth happen in that. I think exact profit margin is not something I'm particularly, that's on my tips. But yeah, since I'm more inclined towards technology and product, so I can talk a little bit more about that right now.
Sure, I'll let that one go. I wonder, actually, since you mentioned subscription and the pricing structure, have you guys seen any evidence of users that are sort of unable to make those payments and having to needing some kind of assistance? Do you guys think about any assistance programs for lower income students?
Definitely. I think affordability and accessibility is a huge challenge in our space. A lot of our users, a lot of our learners come from tier 2, tier 3 cities where, some of them don't even have bank accounts. If they have bank accounts, they don't have cash there. They have cards which have limitations on those cards, on those debit cards. So payments is definitely one of the still uh, challenging space for us. That's where we are facing a lot of difficulty. There are a lot of learners who want to pay, but they are still not able to pay it because they don't have the right sort of means. They're not used to making payments online and so on. So, and I think a lot of NBFCs are coming up. We've been talking to a lot of these loan providers and so on, which are sort of working. Some of them work, some of them are not working well for us. So I think it depends, but that is definitely one of the biggest problems that we face even today. And I don't believe that we have made significant progress there. Like we are still sort of trying to understand this space and just come up with solutions there. One of the things that I'll touch upon, one thing which we think has worked well for us, and that is the credit cards. So we've some of the patterns that we've seen is we've launched EMIs and no cost EMIs, and that has turned out to be working quite well for us. So I think it's mostly going to be a lot of experiments. We will run some experiments and then we'll see if we are actually able to improve the learner's experience or not with that.
Right. You mentioned tech actually a couple of minutes ago. So one question would be, as we're going forward now, and having in mind that the COVID pandemic is still going on, do you guys have any new products in the pipeline? Any directions that you want the platform to take?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, even with live class learning, I think earlier when there was just recorded content, it was very difficult to get a sense of part of community, having a shared experience and so on. But I think moving forward, that is going to be a constant problem that all the tech platforms will have to solve. Where if a student is sitting at their homes throughout the day, just learning something, how do they still get that experience where they feel they are part of something bigger? And yes, a Zoom can definitely help a lot in that, but how can you innovate there and just try to make the experience reach a point where it replaces the offline classroom experience,
Mm-hmm.
and if not just replace, but even improves on top of it. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that is going to be a huge challenge, and which is a question like a lot of people have been asking in the industry, but I think still remains unsolved.
In your mind, is it a challenge best addressed with a variety of third-party tools or kind of internal development? What is your thinking there?
I think it's more of the question is more of like how it should happen.
Mm-hmm.
The third party tools are just going to enable that behavior, but I think it's more of like the question is more of more about what is the ideal behavior. Like if a
Mm-hmm.
learner is sitting at their home and then just studying on the computer throughout the day, what else will they need, and how do you improve that experience? Like doing that 1 day, 2 days, it's okay. Doing that over months
Mm-hmm.
might take a toll on some people, but then how do you improve that experience? So I think it's more of the innovation here has to come in terms of the behavior rather than the tools, is what I believe. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it rolls out, how it pans out.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this is almost all our time, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for taking the time, Hemesh, and for answering all our questions. I wish you the best with Unacademy. I'll be keeping a close eye on the company because I think what you guys are doing is very exciting. Thank you very
Thank,
much.
thank you, Michael. Thanks a lot for having me. Thank you, guys.